Welcome to episode 51 of the Ride and Inspire Rockcast. Today we're talking about something that makes a lot of people uncomfortable. We're talking about why mountain biking is objectively, based on facts, harder for women. And not because women are just not good at riding, or because we're not competitive enough, or because we're making excuses, but this is going to be based on physics, on physiology, and that this sport was designed around male bodies and never properly scaled. So before we start, let me just share this, and don't worry, I'm going to say why this applies to mountain biking. Did you know that a female piano player runs a 50% higher risk of pain and injury than a male piano player? Again, not because she's making excuses or she isn't talented enough. The truth is that pianos claim to be designed as one size fits all. So they're supposed to be gender neutral. They assume that a typical hand will comfortably span a 7.4-inch octave. And yes, most men hands can do that. But that exactly is the problem. The average female hand span is 7 to 8 inches. For men, it's closer to 9 inches. So they're not one size fits all, they're one size fits men. And exactly this applies to mountain biking in many senses as well. First off, I want to say this topic is about realism. It's not about limitation. It's about empowerment and stopping that women are just making excuses narrative. Because mountain biking amplifies differences between men and women much more than many other sports. The first thing I want to look at is a foundational issue that most people do not understand. And that's the difference between absolute strength and relative strength. Women can be incredibly strong relative to their body weight. A trained female athlete can have excellent power to weight ratios, but mountain biking doesn't care about relative strength. Mountain biking demands absolute force production against a non-scalable external load. Let me explain what that means. It means that the bike weighs the same whether you're a 55-kilogram woman or a 85-kilogram man. So the rock you need to lift your front wheel over doesn't get smaller for the woman. The manual you're trying to hold doesn't require less force, and the bunny hop height you need to clear that log is the same for everyone. Yet, women do not bring the same to the table as men do. So let me just hit you with some numbers because I'm not making this up. Women have 40 to 60% less upper body strength than men, and 43 to 57% less lower body strength in absolute terms. And before anyone says, oh, well, just train harder. For bench press, the maximal female strength is about 40 to 55% of male strength, and for leg press, it's roughly 65% less. So what does this mean in mountain biking terms? If the task requires a fixed force threshold, like lifting a 50-kilogram bike, or if it involves generating enough power to manual, where you're basically rotating the bike around its rear axle, then women are operating closer to their maximum capacity much more often. And why does this matter for mountain biking? Well, the bike weighs the same, the brakes require the same force, gravity is the same, and obstacles don't magically become smaller for women. So women operate closer to their max force for longer durations and with much less recovery margin. That leads to earlier fatigue and symptoms such as arm pumps, sore arms, sore legs, sore back. And not because we're unfit or we're weak or we didn't train enough, but because the task is fixed and the reserve is smaller. Okay, so let's talk about power next, because mountain biking isn't just about strength. It's about the rate of force development, also called power. So how explosively can you produce force? Think about moves like front wheel lifts, bunny hops, or recovering from mistakes, or for example, stabilizing after a drop or jump. And men generate twice the jump power of women. Men have significantly higher jump height regardless of body weight, and women's lower body power is 53 to 62% of men's. These are facts. I'm going to link these scientific studies below. And this is why when a coach says, just pull harder or commit more, and especially if this coach is a man and he's saying that to a woman, it's not helpful, because a woman might already be at 90% of her maximum explosive capacity while a man is operating at 60%. And this means if you have less strength, movements need to be more precise. Timing errors are punished more harshly. And the just pull harder advice, it just fails catastrophically because there isn't more power available. This is one reason why women ride more cautiously, because they're riding closer to their safety margin, or they appear less dynamic because they're already near their maximum output, and are often misjudged as lacking commitment when in reality they're being realistic about their capacity. So let me just give you a concrete example about this. For example, the manual. To pivot around the real axle, you require explosive hip extension, and you require the power to shift your center of mass behind the rear wheel while the bike rotates beneath you. So if you have half the explosive power available, you would need twice the technique precision to achieve the same result. This is not a skill deficit, it's physics reality. And what comes into this too, that bikes aren't proportionally scaled. I'm going to come to that next. And our legs are usually shorter, so the leverage also comes into it. And when men have significantly higher jump height in each body mass index, then of course other skills like bunny hops are going to feel much easier to them as well. Maximum jump height determines hop height. So if a woman can jump 30 centimeters high and a man can jump 50 centimeters, the woman is not bad at bunny hops. She's dealing with a lower force ceiling. And I get so many of these comments below my reels. And it is honestly frustrating as a woman to know, hey, this is physics. Of course, technique can always improve. And of course, with technique, you can jump higher and you can improve your height. But there is a ceiling much earlier. It's always going to look less dynamic when compared to a man. And yes, a man will definitely hop higher than a woman. Of course, it doesn't mean that no woman can hop higher than any man. But a trained woman and a trained man, it will always be easier for the man to hop higher than the woman. The move will look different, and it's just not fair to compare the two. Okay, this brings me to the next. As I've already said, equipment scaling. This is where things get really interesting. And actually, there's a book, if you want to look into data bias in a world designed for men. It's called Invisible Women by Carolina Criado Perez, and it's absolutely amazing because the central thesis of this book is that we live in a world built on male default data. When women are not measured, they're unintentionally excluded or disadvantaged, and this applies pretty powerfully to mountain biking as well. So let's talk about bike weight, for example. A 15-kilogram bike is roughly 17% of the total system weight for a 85-kilogram male rider, and is roughly 25% of a system weight for a 60-kilogram female rider. That is a much higher proportional load. This affects acceleration, direction changes, manuals, hops, recovery after mistakes, lifting, carrying the bike, anything. Think about it this way. If you had to ride with an extra 8 kilograms strapped to your bike, would your riding change? Of course it would. You'd be slower, you're more cautious, you'd fatigue faster. Yes, it's possible, but it's harder. And for many women, that's just the baseline reality paired with less strength and power. It's not just weight. Bike geometry is designed around male proportions. Crank arm length on stock bikes is often proportional to frame size, assuming leg length is proportional to height. But on average, women have longer legs, shorter torsos than men, so women end up with reach that's too long, handlebars that are much too wide. This reduces leverage, it compromises control, it reduces mechanical advantage, and this all creates compounding disadvantages for women. And this is where many women then unconsciously think, okay, I'm just bad at this. But the reality is the task cost is just objectively so much higher. Next, I want to look at hormones and neurology and threat sensitivity, because women's nervous systems usually tend to prioritize safety earlier, we escalate threat responses faster, and we often maintain heightened vigilance longer. It's not that we're generally more fearful, it's just adaptive biology. Because in high consequence environments, like exposure or speed or steepness, the cognitive load increases faster for women. So our learning bandwidth shrinks. Skill acquisition slows unless it's deliberately structured. Also, of course, there are hormones, not just the menstrual cycle, but as we age, when we get into perimenopause and menopause, our hormone levels just fluctuate wildly. Also, we lose a lot of muscle mass starting at around 40. We lose much more strength, especially as we hit menopause. And while men do experience hormonal changes too, testosterone declining about 1% per year after 30, women's hormonal changes are just much more dramatic and sudden. And this then often, especially when women train with men, leads to overtraining, to skill regression, to self-blame, and to many other things. And that's why it is very unfair to compare women to men. And if we're still ignoring this, then I'm sorry, it's 2026. We need to start looking at these things. And this is not blind activism. It's honestly just realism. So last thing I want to talk about is elite performance, because this is where the magnitude of the biological differences become pretty undeniable. If you look at the world's fastest woman, she would place roughly 100th or beyond if she were competing directly against elite men. This isn't just cycling. This is running, rowing, weightlifting, track and field. This pattern just holds across all these fields. It's not a value judgment. This is biological reality driven by testosterone, muscle mass, power ceilings, and everything that I've addressed until now. So the critical framing for mountain biking really is, if the very best women on the planet cannot match male absolute output, why should recreational riders expect parity on the same equipment? This reframes self-comparison as irrational and not motivational. But let me make this clear. If it does motivate you to compare yourself to men and to want to be as good as them, then absolutely go for it. But please do not get demotivated when you look at it and say, okay, I need to look exactly like him, because it's just not possible. Because mountain biking uniquely combines a fixed external load. The bike weight doesn't scale. High consequences, mistakes hurt, we don't have as much muscle to rescue it. Technical precision, power bursts. So you need those explosive movements, we have less power. Cognitive load, we need to be constantly decision making. Our brain works differently, and sometimes we do overcomplicate things sometimes. It's just how our brains work. And poor equipment scaling, because the geometries are mostly designed for men. The chainstay on my bike, for example, which is an S frame, is identical to Bernie's bike, and he's on an M frame. So when equipment isn't scaled, this amplifies the disadvantages we have anyway. This makes it less forgiving. It makes the entire sport more strength biased and more error punishing, which is precisely why good coaching and intelligent setup are not optional for women. They're essential to keep us motivated and growing. Remember, this episode is meant to empower, not diminish women, because I just want to say we're not making excuses, we're not overly fearful, we're just navigating a harder task. And skillful riding for women just often means we need even better technique, we need even better awareness, we need even better decision making, we need even more training, and not just brute force, because we don't have it. And for the men listening, when you see a woman riding cautiously or struggling with a skill that feels easy to you, then recognize that she might be operating at 90% of her physical capacity, or even 100, while you're at 50 or 60%. She's not lacking commitment, she's being realistic. And if you coach women or you ride with them, understand that just send it is just not helpful advice when the force ceiling is lower and the proportional task cost is just much, much higher. And if you're a woman watching this, then stop comparing yourself to men unless it motivates you. Just train smarter, not just harder. Respect your hormonal fluctuations, demand better equipment scaling, and celebrate your progress on your terms. This isn't about limitation, it's about realism. And realism is the foundation of empowerment. Thank you for staying till the end. Do share it with someone who needs to hear this. Sending you much love from Spain. I'm Roxy.